Hello Year 5, welcome to your last English lesson of the week. So we're going to finish off this lesson this week by looking at how to change direct speech into reported speech. Okay, so what you will need to do first is you will need to have a copy of both of the reports in front of you. What I would like to do first is I'd like to pause the video and have a read of the Hull Town Report number 1. Okay, so this is the interview report between the interviewer and Mr. Cunningham. It was the gentleman who was sat at his table eating his sandwich when the frogs went flying past his kitchen window. Now, what I would like to do is, can you underline the words that Mr. Cunningham actually spoke? So pause the video and have a read through your work and see if you can find me one example of speech in this report. Okay, so I found an example over here, which is the first part of speech we're going to look at. Now, I've brought up my speech burger, I'm going to move me, just to help us to be able to identify what we're actually looking for when we're looking for direct speech. So we're looking for these 5 points here that's going to build our speech burger, okay? So the first example I found, so I'm going to have a look at this one over here. So I found some speech marks here and I've got a capital letter at the beginning of my sentence. So this is a good indication I'm looking at a direct speech quote. So I have the additional information that's written, so I actually have the spoken words that my character is saying. Now I know that if I am finishing off my sentence with speech, I am looking for my comma or my punctuation and my speech marks at the end, okay? So if I can find a sentence that includes those 5 skills, then that tells me that this must be reported speech because it then follows with he explained. So that's the tiny bit on the end that explains who has spoken the speech. Now you might have found some of these examples as well. So there's a couple more quotes here that you might have found which are also all correct because they all include the 5 different skills needed for direct speech. Now what I would like to do is I would like you to have a look at the Hull Town Report number 2. Okay, what I would like to do is have a read of it. If you're on your own, then by all means just sit there and read it and have a think about this question. If you're with a partner, by all means you can discuss this with your partner, but I'd like you to think about what similarities and differences can you spot between the 2 reports. So pause the video and have a read of the second report and then look at them both together. What can you spot that's the same and what can you spot that's different? So the main thing that I've noticed is that this report, so the Hull Town Report number 2, uses reported speech. I can't find any speech marks in there or any quotes that somebody has said. It is also a lot shorter. Now this one, because it doesn't use direct speech, means it uses reported speech. So it doesn't use the direct words that Mr. Cunningham spoke, but it does tell us what he said. So this is the skill that we are going to be looking at for our lesson today. So, on your piece of paper in front of you, I would like you to write this question in the middle, and we're going to draw a mind map. So what I would like you to think of is, what are the effects of reported speech? So have a look at the differences again between the reports and think about what's the effect on you as the reader looking at the second report. And I'd like you to jot down those ideas around your spider map. Okay, so I've come up with a couple of ideas. Let's see if yours match them or if you've done a better job than I have. So the first thing I noticed is there's less characterisation of Mr. Cunningham. We don't have lots of description about what he's doing or how he's saying anything or how he's feeling. We just have the plain facts of the details of his statements. It's also a lot shorter and a lot more concise. We notice the second report is almost half the length of the very first report that we looked at. However, it does lose potentially some of the key details that we might need. So sometimes there's little snippets and little words that actually add additional information. Just like our reading lesson, when we're looking at feeling tired or being exhausted, just by changing that word changes the depth of the meaning of that particular word. Now, it has a much more formal tone because there's no speech, which can be quite chatty and has mistakes in it and has quite informal language like wow or that's amazing or how you doing. Changing the formal tone when we're looking at the second report means it's a bit more formal. We lose that chatty element to our report. Now, there is the possibility that we could misrepresent our character. If we're just explaining they stated this and they recalled this and they commented on that, we lose some of that character and some of that meaning of what has gone behind the quote that Mr. Cunningham has stated. So there are some pros and cons, good and bad, from using reported speech. But there's a reason sometimes why we use reported speech when we want to be straight to the point, and when we use direct speech when we require that more wider picture and more information. So let's have a look at these examples here. So here is an example of 2 different sentences. Okay, the first one says, "I could not believe what I was seeing out of my kitchen window," exclaimed Mr. Cunningham. And the second sentence here, Mr. Cunningham exclaimed that he could not believe what he had seen out of his kitchen window. Now, I'd like you to pause the video and I'd like you to tell me which sentence is reported speech and which sentence is directed speech. Well done, Year 5. So the very first one here we know is direct speech because we're looking for our rules of using our speech marks and our punctuation to identify it. And here we can see there is no speech marks. Okay, there are no speech marks, therefore there's no direct quote. This is reported speech. So this table down here is going to help us with our lesson today and your task at the end of the lesson. So one of the first things we have to look at when we're changing direct speech into reported speech, that we change it from first person to third person. So here we started off with "I could not believe," because this is what Mr. Cunningham was saying. But when we're reporting it from somebody else's point of view, we have to change that. So we might change the pronoun to either I, he or she, or potentially we could just use their name. But equally, I could change the sentence and say he exclaimed that he could not believe what he had seen. So sometimes you need to change the names and the pronouns to match the speech. When we're talking about it for reported speech, everything changes into past tense. So had the words not already been in past tense, that's something that you would need to do, okay? So here we had an example of what I was seeing. So because this is progressive, because it's something that was still happening at that point in time, we have to change that into past tense. So here we'd use the past tense of had seen. So we've got to change it to past tense. Now sometimes that changes depending on whether we're looking at past tenses that are already in past tense words, but we've got to change them even further. For example, if they were, say that they went to the park, although that's still in past tense, when you're reporting that, you'd have to change that to they had gone to the park. So sometimes you have to be careful. Anything that is future tense would have to be changed as well, so it's got to be the progressive future. Now, sometimes, as we've already noticed, that direct speech can be shorter, okay? Sometimes reported speech in itself will also be shorter, so it just depends on what information we miss out on. Now, if you have any informal words like wow or oh my goodness or any abbreviations, they would need to be changed into more formal words. So if one of our characters like Mr. Cunningham explained, "Wow, I couldn't believe what I saw out of the corner of my eye," we'd have to change the word wow. We cannot say Mr. Cunningham said wow. We would have to try and change that into some form of feeling or emotional word. So he expressed his surprise when he saw the frogs floating past his window. So those are going to be the rules that we're going to look at today, but I'm going to model some examples to you so that you understand.